Hello and greetings everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session today. My name is Vishal Sharma and I'm Senior Specialist at AWS. And joining me is Justin Fox, Director Software Engineering at Mastercard. We will be talking about simplifying management and governance of your existing AWS environment by onboarding your existing accounts onto AWS Control Tower. I will start with basic overview of AWS Control Tower. I will also discuss a few best practices and touch upon AWS Service Catalog in context of Control Tower. Justin will walk us through his company's journey, where they onboarded over 100 AWS accounts onto AWS Control Tower and simplified the SecOps, enhancing operational guardrails, and provide a deeper dive into their governance capabilities. AWS offers a set of management and governance services to help our customers improve business agility and maintain governance control. AWS Control Tower and AWS Service Catalog belongs to management and governance family. These services enable and support innovation, unclog provisioning bottlenecks, improve security and compliance posture, enhance operational efficiency, and help you reduce cost. AWS Control Tower is a self-service solution to automate the setup and management of multi-account AWS environments. It provides you with the capabilities for account creation based on AWS best practices, deployment of AWS best practice blueprints and guardrails, as well as capability to monitor and manage those guardrails. When you deploy Control Tower, you get a framework to set up and extend a well-architected multi-account AWS environment based on security and compliance best practices, what we call automated landing zone. We will discuss in detail what the Control Tower landing zone looks like. It also comes with a set of predefined guardrails. Guardrails are preventive or detective policies you can apply to your AWS environment. We'll also discuss guardrails in detail. With AWS Control Tower, you can easily provision new AWS accounts using Account Factory. Account Factory provides capability to create new AWS accounts with a baseline security posture enabled by preventive and detective guardrails. Control Tower provides a centralized dashboard to allow for visibility into the accounts across regions. With the built-in integration with AWS Single Sign-On, you get a centralized location for identity and access management. You can also integrate into partner IDP solutions with AWS Single Sign-On. You also get a pre-configured log archive and audit account along with built-in monitoring and notification. Since AWS Control Tower is a managed services, there is no code to manage and you will have automatic updates. Talking about the landing zone, Control Tower will create the setup you see in the screen within your management account. It creates AWS organization or use the existing one if it's already there. It creates new organizational units and creates log, archive, and audit accounts. It enables AWS CloudTrail and AWS Config and centralizes login to an Amazon S3 bucket located in the log archive account. It pre-configures Amazon Simple Notification Service, SNS topics that other services could subscribe to. It provides federated access to accounts using AWS Single Sign-On. It also enables guardrails to protect the resources deployed by AWS Control Tower. Now, in case of existing AWS organization, it creates the landing zone in parallel with your existing setup. There are few pre-checks before you want to deploy Control Tower in your existing environment or existing AWS organization. Once deployed, the Control Tower landing zone coexists with your existing environment within AWS organization. AWS Control Tower comes with a set of predefined guardrails. Now, guardrails are pre-configured governance rules for security, compliance, change management, and operations. These guardrails are created based on AWS best practices. Now, AWS Control Tower applies the mandatory guardrails by default. You can choose to apply other guardrails as per your business need. There are two kinds of guardrails. Preventive guardrails, they prevent policy violations through enforcement and are implemented using service control policies. Detective guardrails detects policy violations and provide an alert. These guardrails are implemented using config rules. Now, guardrails are applied at the organization unit level, and applied guardrails, they become part of an account baseline. Now, you can enhance and extend your governance posture provided by these guardrails by adding more service control policies, config rules, IAM policies, and or tag policies. Let's talk briefly about AWS Service Catalog. Now, AWS Service Catalog provides a single location for you to centrally manage catalogs of pre-approved products. Now, products are infrastructure as a code templates with applied security controls with enforced tagging and versioning. A product could be a single AWS service like S3 bucket or a virtual machine, or complex customer solution like three-tier architecture. Portfolios are collection of products for easy management. You can create portfolios and selectively grant access to end user for provisioning. Now, a service catalog administrator can grant access to product that users can launch without needing to give user direct access to the underlying AWS services that provision those resources. This is a simpler experience for the user. When the user logs into their AWS console, they only see products, services, or solutions that have been approved for their use. This is a very powerful paradigm that helps organizations capitalize on cloud velocity, strengthen the overall security posture, and reduce time for cloud adoption. Now, you may ask how this is relevant in case of Control Tower. First and foremost, AWS Control Tower uses AWS Service Catalog for its account factory capability. And more importantly, AWS Service Catalog enables organizations to deploy and manage infrastructure and applications that reflect the organization's security and operational policies at scale in a multi-account environment. With that as a background, let's go through some of the best practices using Control Tower. Like extending AWS Control Tower to align multi-account framework. So what is multi-account framework? Now, it is a prescriptive guidance from AWS on how to structure and manage multiple accounts within an AWS environment. AWS Control Tower follows the guidance in setting up the organizational units based on multi-account framework with primary focus on self-service, automation, and scalability. It is a recommended best practice that accounts are grouped based on function and policies. Now, these best practices aim towards the general use cases that would apply to most of the customers. But however, your actual implementation may vary than what is being shown here as a recommendation. Now, in this framework, organizational units are logically grouped into foundational and additional. The foundational organizational units are shared across the organization, typically the responsibility of a central team. They serve as building blocks for establishing the rest of the account structure. The additional organizational units are for establishing your overall environment and will have dependencies on the foundational organizational units. Now, since these guardrails are applied at the organizational unit level, it further makes more sense to logically group your accounts based on what policies are applied to those accounts. Typically, you would have a different set of policies applied to accounts used in sandbox environment compared to accounts where you would run your production workloads. Now, if you look from a Control Tower perspective, it provides you with the starter kit, right, for the multi-account framework with a built-in log archive and audit account under core organizational unit as a baseline. You can start building your multi-account environment around that. Using Control Tower, you can create organizational units and create new accounts or enroll existing accounts within those organizational units. Now, talking about enrolling accounts within Control Tower governance, we see three different patterns when customers are enrolling existing environment under Control Tower governance. You can deploy Control Tower in new management account, create accounts using Account Factory, and eventually migrate workloads into those accounts using services like Cloud Endure. Or you can deploy Control Tower in a new management account and enroll existing accounts in the newly created landing zone. Alternatively, you can deploy Control Tower in existing management account and enroll your accounts within your existing AWS organization units into Control Tower governance. AWS Control Tower provides you with the capability to tap various lifecycle events, and you can add further customization and automation. Events like new account creation or enable guardrails can be tapped, and you can add customization on top of the base foundation, like adding a transit gateway or adding your VPC flow logs. With Control Tower, you can, using lifecycle events, you can extend governance using AWS config conform inspect. You can, using lifecycle events, you can also centralize management of security tooling services like AWS Security Hub or Amazon GuardDuty. You can also automate service limit increases and enterprise support, as well as integration with your operational processes involving ITSM, asset management, or CMDB. Let's look into an example of customization. Here we are using a create managed account lifecycle event. Control Tower records this lifecycle event when a new account is created using Account Factory. Event Bridge can be used to trigger the instantiation of the Lambda or pipeline for additional actions to be taken. Additional actions could be launching more foundational service in each child account on top of the base out-of-box baseline, or you can make available a portfolio of self-service templates via AWS Service Catalog for the end user to deploy those services. Talking about AWS Service Catalog. Now, you can automate governance at scale in a multi-account setup using AWS Service Catalog. Now, you can create Service Catalog products based on best practice templates in the Hub account and share products to your AWS Control Tower managed child or spoke accounts. The Hub account doesn't have to be the management account. You can also control how you share this product across accounts. Any update on the product in the Hub account propagates to the child or spoke account, enabling central teams to standardize products and automate governance at scale. I hope this gives you a good overview of AWS Control Tower and some of the best practices deployed by our customers. Let me hand it over to Justin, who will walk us through his journey at NuData Security, a Mastercard company.
Thank you for the great introduction, Vishal. I'm here representing NuData Security, a Mastercard company, and we're going to talk about our wonderful journey of onboarding into Control Tower. So first, a little bit about NuData. We're originally a startup based in Vancouver, acquired by Mastercard in April of 2017. We have one of the largest behavioral networks available and provide a lot of different security solutions that are based off of machine learning. We focus in the fraud space or I guess anti-fraud, fraud prevention space, and work to tune out the number of account takeover attacks and automation attacks that occur worldwide. We recognize consumer patterns using behavioral biometrics and block unauthorized access while removing unnecessary friction in real time, lowering the barrier of entry to security solutions while easing the journey for the end consumer. We leverage machine learning to detect evolving security risks in real time, and we have a continual feedback loop to make sure that our events and our secure solutions are the best that they can be. With the sort of company overview over, let's jump into how we use Control Tower to simplify security and operations, or SecOps. In the early days of NuData Security, we had 3 and more AWS environments, ranging from dev to prod to customer. You'll notice on the slides that we use CloudFormation to manage the infrastructure state between each of the different accounts. That was okay, but back in the day, AWS was not as good with that multi-account pattern or framework as they are today. And we started using AWS way back in 2008 and have grown with them. And as we spawned and grew our infrastructure as code practices, we ended up adding more and more CloudFormation stacks for our different applications that power our end solution or our rules engine, NuDetect. As you can see on the slide, we have 3 microservices displayed where it's some layer of compute with some layer of data. When you multiply that out to potentially hundreds of them, it can get quite tedious to manage all the CloudFormation stacks. They were literally spawning out of control. It's almost like playing a tower defense game. Now, after we migrated from manual account creation and then bootloading them with CloudFormation, we moved to AWS Landing Zone and AWS SSO. And that actually improved our lives significantly. It gave us a common framework to rely on with some support from our enterprise support team as well as our account team. It was good, but it required an entire team to manage. It was great that it had all the integrations with AWS Config, GuardDuty, and Security Hub, and a lot of the really cool fine-grained controls, but it literally consumed an entire team's life. And of course, we like to focus on getting rid of all that undifferentiated heavy lifting. So when AWS Control Tower came out, we were pretty excited and kept a keen eye on its progress. What we discovered was AWS Control Tower really simplified that multi-account strategy and framework while enhancing our overall security, requiring less touch points and less interactions between teams to get going. Taking it down from it being a team responsibility to 1 or 2 engineers peeking in on it every now and then to do a check, and the rest of it being handled by the managed service. This was really powerful for us and really helped to reduce account provisioning errors by over 30% while using AWS Control Tower. It really felt like the first true multi-account support on AWS. AWS Organizations was a great start, but it was lacking in a couple areas, and Control Tower really filled that gap. We're now able to run Control Tower on our root account and have it propagate to all of our different products or business lines and business groups. And underpinning that is a lot of Service Catalog, allowing us to propagate approved technologies throughout the organization. So let's chat a little bit about the operational guardrails that come with Control Tower. First off, I'm going to just say that how you name things and how you talk about them really, really matters. It's very easy to get confused over which account you're on in the multi-account pattern, and occasionally you might think you're on dev when you're actually on prod, and nobody wants to drop a database accidentally. Unless you're a chaos engineer maybe, or somebody doing a very strange experiment, but names matter. One of the things on the slides that you'll notice is that you sort of have like a prefix, a product name, and an environment label that we like to use for our account naming. That's pretty powerful because it lets engineers discover the account quickly, whether they're in AWS SSO, logging in and accessing an account, or if they're a security engineer using GuardDuty or Security Hub to try to track down where the problem is in the organization. A little bit more effective than account IDs, at least for a human. When you're applying policy controls, those names also play a key part. You're able to look up a name and maybe know that, hey, we should make sure that no open ports like port 22 or RDP or any of the other commonly accidentally open ports are closed. You might apply guardrails, preventative guardrails for those situations. Across all accounts, you might disallow access keys for the root user of the account. And that can be very, very powerful. Tag policies are also convenient for helping folks identify what to tag resources as well as ensuring that you're able to set a AI opt-out policy globally. The integrated services such as single sign-on, CloudTrail, Config, and CloudFormation are also really key. Internally, we really enjoy using AWS CloudFormation's service managed role in an automated way to roll out additional baselines to our new accounts. The guardrails, especially the preventative guardrails, really added insights into our account compliance dashboards. It allowed us to know which accounts were in danger of being outside of compliance, especially as we are a PCI DSS Level 1 product org. Now let's take a moment to deep dive into some of the more governance topics. One of the favorite and almost understated services that AWS provides is AWS Config with AWS Config rules. It's really easy to write a rule that will identify any type of criteria that you would like backed by Lambda and even remediate those issues. Very often we would use CloudFormation upon an account creation event to deploy a SecOps rule stack, which might have specific actions around remediating, I'm going to say, detective controls in real time. This really eases the burden on your security and operations teams because they're no longer firefighting and troubleshooting quite as often. Instead, they're able to be a lot more proactive. It's also critical to be able to react to events and trigger custom workflows. And this was something that we were very excited about in the AWS Control Tower feature releases. Those lifecycle events around account creation really enabled us to share portfolios in real time and iterate through the accounts and even set up baseline activities local on the account through Service Catalog. That was very beneficial to us in our organization and something that can sometimes be a little understated. So some next steps and follow-up actions. Everybody's favorite part. For me, it's all about improving cloud governance through training. Double down on training is something that you will not regret doing. Having staff trained and prepared is key to your organizational success, especially when you're using unmanaged or managed services to offload that undifferentiated heavy lifting. Combining training with managed services really lets you power your decisions with data, and if you choose to go the EC2 route or manage it yourself, it'll let you see the impact on your bill as well as the impact on your teams seamlessly. Live and die by the metrics. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Vishal, who will take you through the next steps for getting started with Control Tower.
Thank you, Justin, for walking us through your experience. Now, if you ask how can we get started, first and foremost, activate AWS Control Tower in your management account. AWS conducts multiple activation days throughout the year. You can register for one of those. Once the activation is done, you can set up further for scale and operations through automation and customization, and probably do a proof of concept. Finally, you can accelerate adoption by enrolling existing accounts and also integrating with partner or third-party solutions. There are partner Control Tower solutions available in AWS Marketplace. Here are some resources available to learn from more about AWS Control Tower in forms of blogs, videos, or hands-on labs. Thank you for joining the session, and thank you, Justin, for sharing your experience and journey. I request all of you to please complete the session survey and provide us with your feedback. Thank you again.